How wonderful that we will be able to take part of this. Thank you for the invitation, Christer and your team. Fantastic conference. And I also would like to acknowledge my colleague Maria Brogren at the embassy. Thanks for all your inspiration. My name is Helene Larsson Posett, and I'm the Counselor for Cultural Affairs here at the embassy. I've been here for 2.5 years. This is my colleague, Ashanee Kottage, a research analyst, scientist, activist, and storyteller at the Earth Commons and the Laboratory for Global Performances and Politics in Georgetown University. And I actually would like to also present Ilyoma Nyaka, also from the lab here at Georgetown University that we are collaborating with a lot. Me and Ashanee, we will make a short presentation. We will present a performing art project called We Hear You, a climate archive. It's a 4-year collaborating project between the embassy here in Washington and the Royal Dramatic Theatre in Stockholm, Dramaten, and 2 institutions at Georgetown University, Earth Commons, and the Laboratory for Global Performances and Politics. In January, I just want to give you a background. In January 2020, I saw the performance We Hear You at the Royal Dramatic Theatre in Stockholm. And the performance was based on Greta Thunberg's international speeches that she gave around the world, including here in Washington, but also in the United Nations in New York. But in her speech in the House of Parliament in UK in 2019, Greta Thunberg not only said, listen to the science, she also said, is my microphone on? Can you hear me? And the actors at the Royal Dramatic Theatre answered her with a very strong, yes, we hear you. The performance completely blew me away, and I left the theatre with a strong conviction that arts and culture really do have the ability to touch us deeply. And above all, literature and the performing arts have the power to portray what is difficult and very complex. Today, more than 2 years later, We Hear You, a climate archive, has developed to a global performance project exploring youth perspective on the climate emergency. The project commissions more than 70 stories from young storytellers around the world that represent a diverse set of ecosystems or biomes. We reach out to students, researchers, activists, water protectors, farmers, animal lovers, peacemakers, and collect their stories. These stories will form the basis of an archive that will be open to everyone to use, and they will also form the foundation for performances around the world. Since the launch of We Hear You, a climate archive at the Kennedy Center here in DC in March last year, We Hear You have played during the UN conference Stockholm 50+ at Stockholm University in June last year, and during COP27 in Egypt in collaboration with New York Times Climate Forward program now in December. In 2023, this year, we will continue to collect stories and perform them, and we will build on our archive. In addition to this event, the project will include curriculum engagement with students in Washington and Stockholm. In 2024, the project comes back to the Royal Theatre in Stockholm 4 years later, and will have a world premiere performance based on these stories. Everyone's commitment is needed to combat climate change. We need the young people's stories from the most affected areas that can make visible how the climate change feels. We need research and researchers, as Greta says. We need activists, we need journalists, and we need writers. We need the performing arts that can portray the difficult and very complex. Now we will hear to Ashanee's stories, and the floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction, Helene. Hello, everyone. As Helene shared, my name is Ashanee, and I work at Georgetown University's Lab for Global Performance and Politics and the Earth Commons, which is Georgetown's Institute for Sustainability and the Environment. And I'd like to tell you today how I became a climate storyteller. Utrakwe Onem means both as one. first found in St. Paul's letters to the Ephesians regarding Gentiles and Jews together on coins of the Spanish Empire, and later in 1844 as Georgetown University's motto referring to the unity of learning and faith. But what does it mean today to hold two things at the same time, particularly two seemingly contrasting things at the same time? My home, Sri Lanka, is full of all sorts of contradictions like this. We call our beloved local fried snacks short eats, although when you start eating them, it's long before you stop. We have demarcated traffic lanes, but the point is to not stay between the lines. And we have the lion on our national flag and our beer cans, but not a single one has roamed the island for thousands of years. Similarly, Georgetown University is also a contradiction. It is the first American college to hire a full-time Muslim chaplain, open a dharmalaya on its campus, and have such an empowered LGBTQ+ space in a Catholic community. But it is a community that was taken from the Piscataway and the Kottage people. DC is a contradiction. The District of Columbia has 712,000 residents, but they pay more per capita to the federal government than any state, but they don't share in the full rights and privileges of citizenship. DC residents have no vote in Congress. And embassies are a contradiction, bearing the flags of two countries. And Sweden is a contradiction, a non-aligned nation trying its very best to align itself with powerful peace. So utraque unem. So the last couple years, I have been trying to reconcile the dualities. I arrived at Georgetown wanting to be a politician or a diplomat, but I was curious about the environmental sciences. So in 2018, I took a class called The Deeper Sources of Environmental Policy. Professor Claire Fiesler was a GU alum, National Geographic explorer, Smithsonian researcher, marine biologist, journalist, photographer, and children's book writer. She talks about the rise of the science diplomat as a sign of optimism when it comes to transnational dialogue and conservation efforts. She showed me how non-academic writing could be in communicating the lived realities of environmental issues. She quotes Samantha Powers and says, "Go where they are not." So could I be a multi-hyphenate like her? In 2019, I auditioned for a play called On the Lawn. It was a physical devised theater piece, an eco-art installation, and credit-bearing class. We were writing and performing and researching and dancing, which I'd never done all together before in the same place. We were trying to communicate the implications of the American lawn on climate change. Now, I didn't know anything about the American lawn, but I came out having learned about the impact of cultural landmarks on behavioral change and responses to climate science. And one of my professors came to see the show, and beforehand she said, "Oh, I can't wait for my husband to see this, him and his silly lawn. I hope after this he'll let me grow some native plants and turn our lawn into a garden." But afterwards she said, "Wow, I see why he's so attached to it. I see why he loves his lawn. And it doesn't change the science, but it helps me see the equations in his mind more clearly." And I wonder if they now have a lawn or a garden or a lawn-garden hybrid. Utraque unem. In 2020, during the pandemic, I was in my Foundations of Biology class, virtually with a 10.5-hour time difference in Sri Lanka. So it's safe to say I did not want to be in biology class at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday night. But every lesson, my professor would start with a picture of a cell drawn by David Goodsell, a structural biologist and molecular artist. His portfolio includes paintings of molecules that are central to life, such as acetylcholine esterase, collagen and hemoglobin, and heinous pathogenic invaders like Ebola or HIV. And these drawings of cells were so magical. Simply, they helped me see. Like a treasure hunt, I was drawn to the vibrant pinks and greens and yellows and oranges, the floral snowflaking structures, the veins, the vines, and I would inquire, why and how and what? It stimulated me every class, even if it was in the middle of the night. David Goodsell says, "I use the art to serve the science." The following year, still during the pandemic, I was in Foundations of Biology 2. And this time with a 3-hour time difference in Eugene, Oregon. And honestly, I was happy to be in biology at 9 a.m. You'd be surprised at all the things you're delighted to do when you're enveloped in trees. And when you're reading Evolution's Rainbow by Joan Roughgarden, a book on diversity, gender, and sexuality in nature and people. In this class, I learned that species in the animal kingdom are so fascinatingly idiosyncratic. I remember sitting under a tree right next to another tree that was so different from the tree that I was sitting under. And I was thinking, wow, why are we so obsessed with binaries when there's so much multiplicity in this world? Joan Roughgarden tells the story of corals. She says, if you go diving in a coral reef, about a third of the species you see there consist of individuals who are both sexes at the same time, or are different sexes at different times during their lives. Utraque unem. And Joan Roughgarden explaining this research and data in the form of underwater tales with a cast of characters was crucial to my whole class, learning and understanding important information that challenges the myths of evolutionary biology. So in my final year of college, being back in person for the first time, there were all these emotions at odds with one another. Excitement for the return, grief for the time we lost, delight at new opportunities, uncertainty about the future, and solastalgia, which is the distress triggered by environmental change. But one day, I was in my marine conservation class, where I learned about ocean optimism as an emerging subfield in academia. It espouses optimism as a strategy to counter the overwhelming negativity that causes people to stop listening and keep clinging to restless climate anxiety. If there is no hope, then why should we try? Resignation is the collateral damage to apocalyptic storytelling. And hope can be motivating. Knowing we can win inspires people to try to win. And feeling good, well, feels good. So I want us to direct more effort towards identifying, understanding, and celebrating conservation successes. I want us to draw insights from the natural and social sciences. Because these stories, too, are key to securing the knowledge and the political capital to move forward. And ocean optimism doesn't advocate ignoring the problem or toxic positivity. It's based on truth, psychology, and insightful strategy. And optimism has a place in all of this, everything we're doing. And there's lots of reasons to be optimistic. Formerly endangered species are recovering. Rare sea turtles just smashed nesting records in Georgia. The number of overfish stocks in the US reaches an all-time low. There's new techniques for lifeboats. Atlantic corals are spawning. There's a plan to save the endangered zebra shark. And the nutrient inputs to the Baltic has significantly reduced. Of the 176 established Helsinki Commission marine protected areas, 72% currently have a management plan in force. And here we are, at a forum blessed with the intention of collaboration, at a time riddled with conflict and competition. It is not too late to fix this. Vaquitas are probably gone, but there are lots of things we are fixing and can fix if we work together, if we unite the humanities and the sciences. And it was particularly important for me to learn about ocean optimism during Black History Month, and now to be here, a year later, during Black History Month, when I too have been trying to study and celebrate Black achievement, because from the oppression and the struggle comes resilience and so much to celebrate. And even if there's more to do, we must celebrate. Utraque unem. So how do I reconcile all these dualities of my home country, my found city, my major, my minor, optimism with urgency? And I've realized that this duality is irreconcilable. To live the life that I live, as many of us do, is a contradiction. And that's okay. I am a graduate of Georgetown University, where I majored in science, technology, and international affairs, but minored in theater and performance studies. My whole life, I felt the need to choose between these fields, doing scientific research or performing and telling stories. when one day Derek Goldman, the founder of the Lab for Global Performance and Politics, and Pete Mara, the director of the Earth Commons, said, "What if you do both?" And while tools and mediums of artists and scientists differ, the goal is to communicate an understanding of the world around us. The relationship between art and science is symbiotic. When I am creating, I embrace my scientific instincts. I question, I explore. And when I'm researching, I lean on my creative impulses. I call, I respond. Utrakwe unem. So my name is Ashanee Kottage. I come from Colombo, Sri Lanka, a teardrop island that is honestly tired of crying. Still, I'm rooted in the strength of the sapphire from Ratnapura, even as it drifts away from the Indian to the Atlantic. Still, I'm rooted in the resilience of the Panthera pardus cotia, the leopard, the apex predator, now being hunted by harsh monsoons and the driest droughts. I am a climate storyteller, and thank you for listening to my story.